Yesterday, in yesterday's Torah portion, we spoke about the deaths of Abraham and Sarah and the transition to the next generation, which is Isaac, Yitzchak, and Rivka, his wife. One of the things that was probably a little less marquee in yesterday's Torah portion is that someone named Yishmael also passed away. Yishmael was Abraham's son, not Sarah's son. And it was a half brother. A half brother to Isaac, and so you have a scene in these past three Torah portions, not the one we're going to talk about now, not this coming week, where you have Abraham and Sarah. They have two children at home. One is a full child to one, stepchild to the other, and they're two very different kids. One is more quintessential good, and one is not. And there we had where Abraham was not happy with how Sarah was trying to protect her home and her son Isaac from the negative influences of Ishmael. Yes, Andrew, I hit record. Thank you. And God tells Abraham everything Sarah tells you. Listen to her voice. That the idea is that Sarah, as much as you're Abraham and you're a prophet, Sarah has better insight here, and listen to her. That seems to be a pattern that comes over to this week's Torah portion, where we have Yitzchak and Rivka have they're childless for a while, and we're going to read an overview, but it's the same pattern where it seems that Yitzchak is not seeing to the depth of a situation, and it takes Rivka to be able to bring clarity. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to share. Okay, so the Parsha overview. Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebekah endure 20 childless years until their prayers are answered and Rebekah conceives. She experiences a difficult pregnancy as the children struggle inside her. So she feels, anyone, a pregnant women often feel baby kicking, but this was beyond that. There seemed to be a struggle between twins. God tells her that there are two nations in your womb, and the younger will prevail over the elder. So we don't only have two fetuses, but you have two nations coming out of your womb. The first one who comes out is Esau emerges first. And Jacob is born clutching Esau's heel. Esau, the one who came out first, the older one, grows up to be a cunning hunter, a man of the field. And a cunning hunter, in itself, there's nothing evil about that. But if he's just hunting and using it for food and giving it to Habitats for Humanity, but cunning hunter was the way it's read is he was preying on people, and he was very, very antisocial and damaging to humanity. His twin brother Jacob was a wholesome man, a dweller in the tents of learning. Now, for whatever reason, Isaac favors Esau, which seems counterintuitive because Isaac is a very, very introspective, spiritual, meditative person, and he favors his unruly son. And Rebekah loves Jacob. Returning exhausted and hungry from the hunt one day, Esau sells his birthright, his rights as the firstborn, to Jacob for a pot of red lentil stew. Now, in Gerar, just moving along the Torah portion, in the land of the Philistines, Isaac presents Rebekah as his sister out of fear that he would be killed by someone coveting her beauty. Farms the land, reopens the wells dug by his father Abraham, and digs a series of his own wells. Over the first two, there is strife with the Philistines, but the waters of the new wells are enjoyed in tranquility. Esav marries two Hittite women. Isaac grows old and blind and expresses his desire to bless Esav before he dies. Well, Esav goes off to hunt for his father's favorite food. Rebecca dresses Jacob in Esav's clothes, covers his arms and neck with goat skins to simulate the feel of his hairier brother, prepares a similar dish, and sends Jacob to his father. Jacob receives his father's blessing. But so there's a whole conversation we're not going to have today. Is she guided her son to dupe his father, but here she apparently saw that the end justified the means, which is not a way we usually think. Jacob receives his father's blessing for the dew of the heaven and the fat of the land and mastery over his brother. When Esav returns and the deception is revealed, all Isaac can do for his weeping son is predict that he will live by his sword, and that when Jacob falters, the younger brother will forfeit his supremacy over the elder. Jacob leaves home for Haran in Turkey to flee Esav's wrath and to find a wife in the family of his mother's brother Laban. Esav marries a third wife, Machalas, the daughter of Ishmael. Okay. So the conversation for today is about how such a wise, spiritually centered person like Yitzchak would not only be a good dad to an unruly son, but want to give the birthright. No, the birthright, it wasn't really about the assets. The birthright was carrying the mantle of monotheism forward. Yitzchak wasn't the guy, and Rivka knew that. So what I mean, Esav wasn't the guy, and Rivka knew that. So what was Yitzchak thinking? And Yitzchak is presented here as being old and blind. So an easy way of looking at it, listen, they took care of a guy who's half senile, and they took advantage of him. We don't see it that way. We say that he had vision and he knew who he was talking to, but the question is, what did he see that Rebecca didn't see, or that Rebecca? So it's, you can even see from the scripture itself that he had suspicions, because he said he was blind. So and he was a very hairy guy, Esau. So what did Yitzchak do? He put on goat skins. His mother told him to put on goat skins. Okay, Yitzchak's been around the block. He might be able to tell the difference. Aside from that, when Yaakov spoke to him, he says in the scripture, it says the arms are the arms of Esav, the hands are the hands of Esav, but the voice is Jacob's. And so whether he knew it exactly, I don't know, but he wasn't stupid, and he wasn't out to lunch where they were just getting him to sign a paper, holding his hand. There was a method to how he was thinking, and there was a method to the way Rivka was thinking. And Rivka, obviously, at the end, she's vindicated because it was Jacob. But the real question is, what was Yitzchak thinking? So I want to, as I mentioned, if you came late, well, I love this course, and this lesson, especially focusing on Rashi, and a lot of Chabad rabbis around who use this are dealing with it. It's not exactly always for the every community, and some of it really necessitates knowledge of Hebrew and background. I'm probably, if we can just start from text 8, if we have time to go back, maybe we'll get something of it. But the Rashis are really not. It's just going to be confusing to us. Yeah.
Rashi was from the 11th century, right?
Rashi was born in 1040. He passed away 1105. Rabbi Shlomo, son of Yitzchak, a great rabbi, a wine merchant, and he's the premier commentator on scripture, Talmud, all scripture and Talmud. He's very concise, very deep. He's buried in Worms, yeah. In Troyes.
Yeah, I've been to Worms Cemetery. I was looking for
I think he's buried in Troyes.
I think you moved up a couple of readings.
Well, that's right. That's what I just mentioned, that we're going to go to 8, because the first ones, I don't think we're going to be able to manage them. Okay, text 8. This is about what Rebecca, we said that Rebecca was experiencing a difficult pregnancy, and there's a lot going on in the womb. So text 8. The Medrash tells us that when Rebecca stood near a synagogue or house of study, you can imagine there weren't too many of them, but where there was a place of some high-minded spirituality, Jacob struggled to emerge. When she passed a house of pagan worship, Esau struggled to emerge. What does that mean? Is that she herself, she was very happy after 20 years to finally be pregnant, and she feels that there's something going on. Maybe, well, someone did tell her, but maybe even a midwife might have told her that she's got more than one in there. But she felt in her, and maybe this is more metaphoric than not, but she felt that there were two different poles in her, and two different poles, moral poles. When she walked by a place of pagan worship, there was some kicking going in that direction, to a place of more high-minded, godly thinking. So she already knew, and she had been told also that eventually that there's these two nations, which isn't two nations, but two poles of goodness and
I
not.
think you're going to get in trouble with this.
Yeah.
Can we move it out?
No, it's
Can
well.
we move it back with you, to your back,
Okay.
or your side, that way, but not better your side. that way.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talmud says, "Who is wise? The one who sees what's going to be happening. The next step."
Yeah.
All right. 9a. This is from Maimonides. Oops, sorry. He writes, the philosophers maintain that there are two personalities. Those whose deeds are good and important, but who crave and desire terrible things. They subdue their inclinations and rein in their desires. Then there are the pious ones. Their good behavior is stimulated by their desires and inclinations. They perform good deeds because they crave and desire them. So in his time, he's saying that a conventional way of seeing the world is that much of this is nature, and some people are born with rough nature, not good inclinations, and if they want to live a good life, they're really going to have to struggle. And some people are born more goody two shoes, just they're easy. Now, they form because they crave and desire them. Okay, but then he continues. The consensus among philosophers is that the pious are more praiseworthy and perfect than those who rein in their passions. The latter might be identical to the righteous in behavior, yet they are of lower stature due to their negative tendencies. Even if they don't surrender to these tendencies stain their souls. So the philosophers in the times of Maimonides, he said, people say, if someone is born with an easier, smoother, more positively inclined nature, they're a better person. But even if someone who behaves well, but they have to struggle not to do something negative, they have to struggle to do good things. That's something which is, we're glad they're doing something, but they have more of an inferior character. That's the way the philosophers would see it. But Maimonides says, yet, when we examine the words of our wise sages, we find that those tempted to sin are more praiseworthy and complete than those with no sinful cravings. He says, Torah thinking flips that around. If someone is struggling to do something good and they achieve that, they are, in a way, to God, even more praiseworthy and complete than someone who has it coming easy. They went so far as to say that the more perfect and complete one is, the more desirous of sin one becomes, and the more difficult it becomes for one to overcome those desires. So even if you have a good nature in one area, there's got to be a challenge somewhere. Everybody has a moral challenge. Moreover, they said our reward is commensurate with how difficult it is to resist our tendencies. So Maimonides puts out there is a very basic, but very fundamental and important Jewish teaching, which is that life is about accomplishing, taking who we are, what we're given, and seeing what we can do with it. So if someone is just think of it this way. Imagine two kids in algebra class, and one of them was not gifted with a natural facility for math, works really hard, does the homework, works out at home, pays attention in class, and gets a 90. Another kid has a natural facility for math. It's a natural facility for math. Some of us are born in different ways. Never does the homework, never studies. Comes to class and gets 100. It's legitimate. One got 100, one got a 90. You say one is a better student than the other. The other hand, for the teacher with an appreciation for the fact that education is about the development of a human, who do you think the teacher respects and appreciates more? I can tell you, if it was me, for sure, someone who took a nature which is not totally inclined, not easily brought to a place of accomplishment, worked with it, didn't get 100, but got so much more than they would have naturally. that is a something to be celebrated in life. And when we look, what Maimonides is saying is that just at a basic level, the idea that someone is born with an aggressive nature, and someone's born with a much more docile nature. The one with the docile nature is going to be easier to raise, and an easier sibling, and probably easier to get along with. The aggressive one probably going to break some eggs every once in a while and step on people's toes. Now, you want to teach. There are a couple of elements here. You want to teach the aggressive one not to be so aggressive with people. You have to hold it back. When someone's speaking, don't interrupt them. You don't have to get your way. Make space for someone else's. The aggressiveness can get in the way. You want to teach someone just to be a socially competent person. If they do become that, if they have harnessed that aggressive nature, so that they are people who can really be compatible with social settings. They didn't have it naturally, but first of all, what they've done is they've taken their raw nature and improved it, which is a beautiful thing.
All right, so if we take this theory and we bring it back to Esau and Jacob, wouldn't it be why Isaac favored Esau? Because there's the potential for change.
Bingo! There's potential for change, and not only that, even more than that, I was going to say, when you take, I think that many people who have accomplished unusual things in this world, you could see that they didn't fit into a box, and they were probably not good students. And so it takes someone with vision to say, okay, you have energy, and let's channel it in a good way. Someone who's a person who's docile, plays by the rules, you know what to do, what not to do, and you stay in your lane. Esau didn't stay in his lane. He stepped on people's toes. He broke things. Now, what if you can get someone to say, take that attitude and look and say, what can you do to shake up society? What can you do to think different? An aggressive person has energy to say, I'm not going to just relax and say, well, this is a problem humanity has lived with for all these years, and we're just going to keep living. I want to shake up. I want to find a way to change it. I want to heal things. And I'm not intimidated by the fact that there's a status quo, because who says I have to surrender to a status quo? I don't, that's not my nature. My nature is to change the status quo. A docile person plays with the status quo, goes with the flow. An aggressive person says, not so fast. Now, I was just remembering, So one of my nephews just said something really off to his teacher. I'm just remember what it was. Yeah, but he's 6 years old. His teacher told him to do something, and he spoke back. It was actually brilliant and funny, but it was what we call chutzpah. You know, you don't talk that way to a teacher. He has to be trained not to do that. On the other hand, someone who doesn't just easily accept authority, say, you know, we can, you know, they accomplish things. So it's not, it's, first of all, there's the beauty of change, which is what Rhonda brought up, and that's true. And then there's the beauty of harnessing an energy. I'm being recorded, so I'm a little careful with this. my
7 second delay.
the rabbi who really led Chabad in California all these years, actually, Steve has met him. Very, very dynamic guy. He's not a guy who takes no for an answer, and he doesn't only knock on doors, he breaks down doors. What he did in California is amazing. There's probably, I don't know, 200 Chabad houses there. I don't know how many it is. He was my father's student here in Newark, and my father talks about it. He said he was such a wild guy. There was, you know, you had to find something what he could possibly do to make a living. The Rabbi said, "I'll tell you what, go to California and shake it up." And he did, yes.
Okay, in terms of 9b,
Yeah.
you have Isaac, who is wanting to bless Esau. Now Esau goes off hunting, which presumably even in that era, if Isaac, being righteous, had wanted game, that is as treif as if you wanted shrimp.
Well, not necessarily. First of all, there was no laws of kosher or shechita at that point. The only thing he couldn't do is eat the limb of the limb of a living animal. Aside from that, if he's doing it for his father, he'll bring back the game and prepare for his father the way his father wants it.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that it says, now that you brought that up, in this vein, what happened is he says Yitzchak says to Esau, "I want to bless you," and he's an old man, and his doctor was probably limiting his diet already, also. But he says, "Go make me something, a savory dish." And the way that the Torah describes it, it's a dish where there's a combination of ingredients. So one of the things that is spoken about, and the founder of Chabad writes, brings this in his foundational book of Tanya, says, Yitzchak was saying, there's something special about a recipe that takes something very sour or pungent or sharp that you really don't want to eat on its own, but as part of a larger whole, it brings a special kick or spice to the meal, because you're not taking it out of its context. It's just one of a larger recipe of elements, ingredients. What Yitzchak was saying is that I love the idea of transformation, of taking something that in and of itself is unworthy. It's not likable, but when you mix it together with other things that soften it and guide it and channel it, it's a force for flavor, for good. That was a message to Esau, that your aggressiveness, in and taken out of its context, it's really not a good thing. However, if it's part of the larger whole, where it's an energy that you're guiding with a moral compass, with a moral North Star, it's driving goodness, then it's just, it's not, we're not looking at it decontextualized. It's part of the larger whole, and maybe that aggressiveness taken out of its context would be unpleasant, but keep it in the context of good. And in the context of productivity, it can be a great thing. So it's the same idea of looking at people, looking at ourselves, looking at those we have influence on, and saying, okay, here is a challenging trait. Does a challenging trait, is that just a blemish? Say, this is the way they're born. They have a handicap. Or can you say that this is something that, with work and proper perspective, this is something that can actually be a force for good? And that's really where what Isaac was seeing in Esau, and what this lesson is about. That there's a real beauty that we need to see in each. This is about kids, but it's really in anyone. If someone has an antisocial element to them, use that as an example. I want to see something you're not going to eradicate, but you can channel it in a more productive perspective. You want to do this one?
I'm overlaying
Okay.
this with the recent presidential election.
So
It's a tape there, we recorded it.
okay, so without getting into who anyone voted
Never
for,
make you late.
without getting to who anyone voted for, okay?
What's that?
Without getting into who anyone voted for,
Oh, I'm not saying.
No,
I'm not-
but let's say the reality is the reality, right? You have someone in office who has a tendency to be impulsive, not care about precedent, and just do things and say things the way I want it said, without caring too much about how it's perceived. Maybe that'd be pleasant for people around sometimes. However, if that's channeled in a good way, it's good to shake things up. I would say I have more of the Jacob tendency. I'm not looking
Not
to
disruptive.
I'm not disruptive.
Well, you're saying.
I should be more.
You're saying Esau is strong and Jacob is double.
I never said that.
That's what you're
I
saying.
never said that. This is about no comment. But I would say is when he moved the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem, we were sitting in this room, and I'll admit to this, I said, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of that, because it's a political thing. It's not a mitzvah. It's a good thing. And the US government had a resolution of 20 years that no one acted on, that it had to be moved to the Congress had resolved in the 70s that it has to go to Jerusalem. Just no one had the guts to do it. I was afraid that it would cost lives. I was afraid it would cost an uproar in the Middle East, new waves of terrorism, and was it worth moving it to Jerusalem? What happened? Bupkis. Nothing. There was a little a little squeak, and then 3 days later, no one was talking about it anymore. So I was wrong. But it took someone to say, I don't care about the precedent. Not just I'm going to do this. There's something good to at least a little bit of that in a personality. To stand up and say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be polite, which we don't get there. But the idea is that I'm not going to be obnoxious about it, but I'm not going to stay away from doing what I need to do. So, channeling that type of a perspective, channeling that type of a tendency can be a very good thing. There's when my father started with the yeshiva, the Rebbe told him, he said, there are students who don't really need guidance, and there's not much you can help them. They're set. They're pretty good. He's dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old students. They were studying. They know how to study on their own. So he said, those people, those kids are nice, are good. That's not your job. Most of the students are not instinctively always going to do the right thing. And they need guidance. And that's why you're there. Some people are great, whether it's to their nature or maybe they made themselves into that. That's wonderful. But if they're in a good spot, then maybe the only thing to encourage them is to do even better. There's and you've definitely heard this, Steve, but something that struck me when I was a student was in Jewish law, when Jewish law analyzes what's kosher or not kosher in animals. A kosher animal has to be a healthy animal. So when we slaughter an animal, we open it up, you check to see if there's any sign of disease. So the Talmud and Code of Jewish Law gives the following scenario. It's like you're standing on the banks of the Passaic River, and you see a bird flying in front of you, a kosher species of bird, and it does a belly flop on the river in front of you. So now you're hungry, you have a knife for shchita, but since you want to eat it for lunch, it's a duck. But since it did that belly flop, the question is, should you assume that it sustained internal injuries, and when you open it up, it's going to be unkosher anyway? Because if it can't live through the year, it's not. So this is the litmus test that the Talmud gives. So if it's floating in the river, see what it's doing. If it's just floating with the current, compare it to a branch or a leaf going with the current. If it's just going with the current, don't bother. If it's not dead, it's dying. But if it's going quicker than the current or swimming upstream, reel it in. Because going quicker than the current or going upstream means that there's life there. And as a student, especially because I was very bored with the topic, because I'm not really into the anatomy of animals, it was a lesson to me that just going with the current, even if it's a good current, that's not called being alive. It's just doing what you do. Moving upstream or doing even better than your norm, your status quo, that's good. Inertia, even if it's inertia in a good spot, that's not called being alive. So for me, and for anybody who thinks like me, the fact that I'm wearing a yarmulke now doesn't take instinctively any conscience at all, any consciousness at all. Why? I've been wearing it since I'm 3. Not this very same one, but I'm wearing something since I'm 3. And it's just a natural thing I do. Someone else who's about to walk into a shul and they haven't worn a kippah in 40 years or never worn a kippah or whatever it is, and they come and say, I'm going to put on a kippah out of respect for the fact that I'm walking into a synagogue. That's major. You could say, oh, I'm ahead of the game because I am observant or a rabbi or whatever, and I always wear my yarmulke. Yeah, but this is not what. It's not a bad thing, but is this some type of achievement that I wear a yarmulke? Is no achievement. The fact that I put on tefillin this morning and I prayed, if I found connection and I worked with myself to focus, that is something that is, it's a gift to God. The fact that I put it on and said the words, I've been doing that for whatever 50 something years. It's just status quo itself is not something to celebrate, even if it's a good status quo. So Yitzchak, in looking at his children, said, Jacob, you're great. But we can imagine, I can see such incredible potential in Esau. Yeah, I know he breaks windows. And I know he got arrested. But imagine what we could do if he turned him around. He can turn the world upside down. And you're good. But you're in your lane. And that's what he was hoping for. Rivka wouldn't have disagreed with that. What she said was, it ain't gonna happen. What you're doing is you have a wonderful dream, but it's a dream, and we can't bank our family on that. And therefore, she put her chips with Jacob. Let's look at 10. The sages of blessed memory said, God makes no unfair demands of his creations. From this, we infer that the Torah and mitzvahs that God gave us are not beyond our capacity. Though it is tough to comply correctly with all the Torah's requirements, the Torah was nevertheless given to us because we can live up to the challenge. This is an idea that people, we're given our deck of cards. Now, you say, with this, I can't accomplish that. I can't accomplish that. I can't be observant here. It's all real. What the Torah Talmud's saying is, you can do more than you think. And there are two things I would say. First of all, we can do more than we think. Second of all, there's this shouldn't be a way out of doing something. I'm just checking because I have to go to that unveiling. There's once saw a commentary in the Talmud, and it writes that he's interpreting a piece of Talmud where it says Moses went up on Sinai. He was shown different things, and one of the things he was shown the rewards in heaven of different mitzvahs. And it's framed as through a palace and going through different rooms, and the brilliance of lighting Shabbos candles, the brilliance of putting on tefillin, and all he's going through, seeing the different rooms. Then he passes another room, says that was outshone the most. And what's that? That's what people who genuinely wanted to do the right thing, they just didn't happen for reasons beyond their control. So there is something to that too. At least we can show God. I wish I could. I'm trying to do what I can. Sometimes it just the realities don't allow it. And so this point is saying, and it's a very important one, not to judge ourselves or judge others by the challenges they have. We all got challenges. And the question is what they do with the challenges. If they work with them, and maybe some people can't see it, but if they know that really they're trying to do the best that they can to get past it, even if it's not showing itself in real life, that's something to be said. So there's a lot to be said for that. Look at the key points. Number one, some people are born with the capacity to be righteous, and others with the capacity to be wicked. I think the language is not good here. It's not the capacity, with the tendency to be righteous, and some of the tendency to be wicked. Doesn't mean they will be that way, just that they can. We're born with different tendencies. Most parents prefer that their children be among the former. However, there's one benefit to being among the latter. The capacity to be wicked comes with the resources to overcome temptation. Number four, God never asks of us what we can't deliver. If he challenges us, it means he gave us the ability to overcome the challenge, or like I said, at least to get as far as we can. Number five, this means that a child with the capacity to be wicked has greater inner resources than one born righteous. To access and activate these resources, this child requires a challenge. But once challenged, their innate strengths emerge. Actually, so one second. I think I missed a question here in the chat. Okay. Okay. Actually, if you indulge me for a second, I want to just see what the. I'm going to share something with you. Okay, it's not coming up, but it's the idea of a kid who has chutzpah, and yeah, okay, not here. I'm not going to get it in time. I'm not going to keep everyone here. Anyway, if there are any questions, I'll take them. If not, I have a
Rabbi.
Yes.
Just very quickly, I'm sorry, I didn't when we got on this morning, I hadn't read. I just read what happened to the rabbi.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that when we started.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And with the family, unfortunately, even crazier. I don't know if you remember what happened in Mumbai. That was also this time of year. It was right before it was Thanksgiving Day. The rabbi and his wife, his name was Gabi Holtzberg. The wife of this man who passed away is his wife is Gabi Holtzberg's niece. So that family, the amount of
whatever happened to their little boy? Do you know?
He had his bar mitzvah. He's being raised by his grandparents. I mean, you see something every once in a while. That was horrible and surreal. But this one, apparently, they tried to kidnap him also, and he fought back, and that's why they had to kill him. They felt they had to kill him. This Kogan.
I'm sorry, what happened?
It wasn't this morning. Last week we only found out about it last night. The Chabad rabbi in Abu Dhabi, who is he's a Russian Israeli or Moldavan Israeli, and he was kidnapped and murdered. Memory should be for a blessing.
Figure gets into a lot of this
We will.
stuff.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.